Welcome back to Epic Exchanges. I'm your host, Kelly Snider, and you know that I believe that our personal stories matter so much, and it's so important to share them because they can help other people going through difficult times. And right now in our world, we need the positivity and inspiration and empowerment that come from stories from people just like us. And I am really excited to welcome today's guest because we've been trying to get this on the calendar for, I think, a couple months now, and it's finally worked. So, welcome, Derrick. Why don't you introduce yourself for our audience?
Hi, how are you? Yeah, Derrick McManus here. I'm from Australia. At the moment in America, it's very late at night for Kelly, and here in Australia, it's early morning. So it's great to be here. My background is 42 years of policing. I've been a police officer for 42 years, and I operated in the police STAR group, Special Task and Rescue Group, for about 11 years. Now, the Special Task and Rescue Group, we do high risk arrest, we do hostage siege, we do counter-terrorism, and I equate that to something like your Navy SEALs, your Delta Force, all those sorts of people, and as a result of some of my experiences there, I now have a very different life to that. And what I do these days is I wander, I wonder. What I do, I like to think of it, I wander around the world and open conferences or close conferences as an inspirational speaker with a big, big story. But what I talk about is what I call human durability. And human durability is our ability to go beyond resilience. Resilience is our ability to bounce back after something goes wrong. Human durability is about being able to sustain optimal performance. And that's physically, mentally, and emotionally too. And emotional sustainability is something that we don't often address. We always want to perform better at work or sustain our physical performance, but sustaining our emotional performance allows us to do those other things. And I love doing it.
Well, now with that introduction, I am really excited to hear your story and what led to this new career for you. So, why don't you dive in and tell us about your experience?
So, as part of Star Group, I my section were asked to go and arrest a guy, and this guy had a warrant for 197 counts of fraud. Now, the warrant was because he hadn't turned up in court, and the courts had issued the warrant for his arrest so that we would take him to court. But we knew what this person's potential was. We had been involved with him a couple of times, and he had threatened to shoot police in the past. So we had a bit of a hint that he might be violent. He'd never done anything of violence, but he'd always intimidated people. So we went up to his house, and you can see the video on YouTube, or on my YouTube channel. And we went to the house. We were in full police blue uniform. We knocked on the front door. There was no answer. But we had one of our other snipers sitting in the bush for about the last 20 minutes watching the house. So we knew he was inside. We knew he should be answering. We knocked again, we called again, but again, there was no answer. At this stage, I moved down the side of the house to check out a glass sliding door that might have afforded us a more efficient, more effective, safer option for entering the house to arrest him if we had to break in. And as I got to within about 2 feet of that sliding door, he started to shoot. I was the target. He was using a 7.62 SKK Chinese military assault rifle. He fired 18 times in less than 5 seconds, and he hit me 14 times in less than 5 seconds. And I will go into more depth about what that felt like at that time, how I responded to it in just a little while when we dive deep into the story. But the overview was that I was shot 14 times in less than 5 seconds with either bullets or shrapnel. And I was then lying on the ground, fully conscious, managing my mind, managing my body, managing my mindset in particular, so that I could survive for 3 hours. When the first doctor got to me, he said he didn't know whether I was dead or alive. He said that when he first saw me, there was no movement, there was no color because I didn't have enough blood left to give my skin pigmentation. There was no sound and I wasn't breathing. And he said he thought I was already dead. And It's quite humorous the way he tells it. He said, Derrick, when I first saw you, I didn't know whether you were dead or alive. And there was no color, no sound, no breathing, no movement. And I thought, should I even bother taking a look? And I said, pardon? And he said, but as I was looking at you, you took this last gasping breath and there was a flicker of your eyelid. And I thought, oh, well, I may as well at least take a look. I said, oh, thank you very much. But what he didn't tell me, and this is the beautiful part of the story, is that he was standing in direct line of fire from where the shooter was, and bullets were whizzing around his ears. So that doctor, the nurse that stood with him to treat me, my mates from Star Group who were standing around to protect them and to assist them, they were all standing in direct line of fire for 10 minutes to treat me, stabilize me, before they put me in the back of the ambulance and took me to hospital. Now, spoiler alert, before we get into the story, I did survive, but even that was not predicted to happen. The doctor told me I should not have survived the shooting. In fact, again, quite humorously, he has said this, and he said this on camera to a news reporter. He said, all the textbooks say that Derrick's heart should have stopped. The only reason it didn't stop is Derrick hadn't read those textbooks. So I should not have survived the shooting. I should not have survived surgery. Even after surgery, they said that I should have had major complications because I was shot twice in the stomach and all my bowel content emptied into my stomach cavity. And I should have had septicemia and all sorts of complications. And I should have had complications from all the medication they gave me. And then they told me that, okay, you survived well, but we predict that you're going to have troubles walking. You won't be able to walk properly, let alone run, hop, skip, and jump. And I defied those odds as well. And the biggest odd that I defied was that going through such a massive trauma, physical, mental, and emotional trauma, because as I was lying on the ground, I monitoring my body, monitoring my mindset, and my physiology, noticing my body closing down. And I even got to the point where I lost so much blood that my vision closed down and I saw the white light. Now, going through all this and having this massive traumatic rehabilitation process to go through, people expected that I would have PTSD, stress, anxiety, depression as a result of it all. But one of the most powerful things I did was about 5 days after the shooting, I threw my hand in the air and said, get me a psych. I want to talk to a psych. Now, it's not because I thought I was weak or I didn't think I had psychological issues at the time, but I just wanted to pick the psych's brain about, I've gone through this massive trauma. What can I expect from now? I can expect nightmares, flashbacks, what do you call them? Panic attacks, and all sorts of traumas. And I wanted to know who's dealt with them well, who's dealt with them badly, what could I expect, and how would I be able to manage those things? And when I spoke to him, I didn't have any of this structure of human durability. It was just a thing that I did in my mind. But just 3 months after the shooting, on my first meeting with a psychiatrist, he said, Derrick, psychologically, you can go back to work tomorrow and you don't need any ongoing therapy. And so this is where the concept of human durability has come from. It's the things that I did in preparation prior to the shooting. It's the things that I was able to do while I was on the ground, to control my mindset, to control my physiology, to control my response to the shooting, and certainly the things that I did after it. And I believe that we can all, what I talk about in human durability is post-traumatic growth. It's not post-traumatic stress. It's how do we avoid post-traumatic stress. And it's a really interesting concept to discuss. How do we avoid post-traumatic stress? It's by saying that that is normal. I had nightmares. I had flashbacks. I had bad dreams. I had things where I've gone, oh my gosh, this is similar to. But they were never to the extent they took control of my life. When they happened, I've just gone, wow, that was interesting, and accepted it as a normal part of my progress. And as a result of being shot 14 times, I experienced post-traumatic growth. And it's that growth that I like to discuss with other people, and how can we do it for any trauma that we face anywhere in life.
Well, I love that reframe. So, if you don't mind, can we go back to the moment that the person you're trying to arrest started to shoot? And I know you said it was within 5 seconds. All of these, he fired so many times, and you were hit 14 times. Uh, do you remember what was going through your mind in those 5 seconds at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so when it first happened to me, I had absolutely no idea what was happening at all. All I knew was I was suddenly falling to the ground. And I was absolutely berating myself with disgusting language that I wouldn't use on your podcast. But, the normal sort of boy stuff who's, been in that environment. But I didn't feel any impact. I didn't feel any pain. All I knew was I was falling to the ground. And what it was I wasn't conscious of the pain, but my body was responding to absolutely everything by just collapsing to the ground. As I was halfway to the ground, I looked at that glass sliding door again, and there were small round holes that hadn't been there a moment before. And then I heard the sound of gunfire. Still hadn't felt any pain, no impact at all. But I've rationalized I must be falling because I'm getting shot. And in that moment, I stopped berating myself. And I actually said to myself, before I hit the ground, I actually said to myself, Derrick, don't be too tough on yourself. If you're getting shot, it's quite acceptable to fall over. And that is part of, I was so well prepared for what I could realistically expect to encounter that I'd done the preparation. If I get shot, how do I want to respond? What can I expect of myself? How is it going to affect me? And it was, okay, I am being shot. I need to manage this proactively. And I was able to reframe that back to being kind to myself and saying my response is absolutely normal. And it's okay to be doing what I'm doing, but I now need to do something more positive now that I realize what is actually happening. So I've fallen to the ground, I've fallen onto my back, and he is still shooting at me while I'm lying on the ground. And this is when 2 bullets hit my left thigh. These 2 bullets, part of that volley of 18 bullets in less than 5 seconds that were fired, these 2 bullets seemed to take 30 seconds to hit me, have their effect, and time to move on. And the first one I felt, it was like a sledgehammer just absolutely slamming into my thigh without pain. It was the impact, but no pain associated with it. And then it sent a shockwave through my body, and my body was lifting and writhing on the ground as this shockwave went slowly through to the top of my head. And then that shockwave came back slowly down through my body. And then I felt the second one hit. And again, it's that sledgehammer, body lifting and writhing and settling back down to the ground. And in this seemingly 30 seconds, I was abusing myself again. How could I lie here for this long and not do anything to protect myself? So I knew I needed to fire back. But before I fired back, I did a little analysis of the situation. I knew I was firing back along the length of my body, and my feet are at the other end of my body, and my feet are pointing up. And I knew I needed to get up just that little bit so I could shoot over the top of my feet. But I've got a flak vest on, or as people know, a bulletproof vest, but I can guarantee they are not bulletproof. We call them flak vests. I had the flak vest on, I had weaponry, I had equipment on my upper body. And as I've lifted my upper body, my feet have come up to counterbalance. And my thought that ran through my head was, I better not shoot myself in the foot, because the guys at work will give me shit for the rest of my life. You can just imagine you get shot 14 times and then you shoot yourself as well. Now, people say, how could you possibly have such deliberate, conscious, rational conversations with yourself in the midst of this adversity? And this is what I talk about with human durability. But human durability, I describe as I prepared myself for what I could realistically expect to encounter in my day-to-day life as a result of the choices that I've made or the consequences I find myself in. And the choices I made were to go into the police department. The police department itself is a very dangerous environment. I have been in a couple of gun incidents prior to getting into Star Group. We approach houses People are violent. It's a very dangerous environment. I went into Star Group, and Star Group, high risk arrest, hostage siege, counter-terrorism. When the Queen came to visit Australia, we were the close quarter protection to the Queen. We do cliff rescue, we do cave rescue, we do mine rescue, we do helicopter operations. So as a result of my choices, I could anticipate that I may be shot and injured, I may be shot and killed. And I prepared myself for that. But what I talk to people about, and this is everyday people from 10-year-old kids in schools to hairdressers, to doctors, to finance, to real estate, all the way through to fighter pilots. I talk to them about what choices are you making in your life that you can better prepare yourself. What can you realistically expect to encounter in your life as a result of the choices you've made or the circumstances you find yourself in? Now, most people are not in circumstances where they're going to prepare themselves for being shot 14 times. But no matter what the challenge is, the methodology, the systems, the processes to manage challenge and change in our lives are very, very similar. And so that's why human durability is just this this universal philosophy, which applies to anybody and everybody. Anybody who talks about needing resilience, we need to be a little bit more resilient. I don't think they need to be resilient. I don't think they want resilience. Yes, we need to be able to bounce back, but we don't want to be bouncing back all the time. What we're really looking for is where we can get to a place in life where we can say, I've got this. I know exactly what I'm doing. I am so comfortable with where I am at the moment. I can actually start enjoying it rather than worrying about what's going to go wrong. And that's that point of human durability, where we can sustain optimal performance and we can enjoy the environment that we're working in.
Right. Okay, so let's go to preparation.
Yeah,
Obviously, being a police officer and being on this specialized team, there is some preparation that your job affords you in training and expectation and even the gear, the flak
absolutely.
jacket and the weaponry and knowing how to shoot and all the things. But would you say that there is other preparation besides you preparing yourself, knowing that by taking on a career like this, you were putting yourself in harm's way probably every day, and that these possibilities existed? Are there other things that you would credit your preparation to in that moment and since then?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're absolutely spot on. My job afforded me physical preparation. So we were physically fit and we got to do that at work. We were afforded mental preparation. So I talk about the the physical, mental, and emotional preparation. The physical was afforded, the mental preparation. I call this the intellectual stuff, the how to use weapons, the processes, the procedures, the policy, legislation, all those intellectual things. The thing that my job didn't prepare me properly for was the emotional side. Now, the emotion is the one that controls every response we have. There's something that happens in our minds. Our emotions and our rational thinking generally sit on an even plane. And when they're on an even plane, that means that everything is going well. It's predictable. We understand what's going on, and we can be creative. We can get funny. We can analyze. We can debate. We can do all those things because they're on an even plane. But when things start going wrong, and the American military call it VUCA situations, when things become volatile, when things become uncertain, complex, or ambiguous, our emotions go high and our rational thinking goes low. And this is what my work did not prepare me for, because my work told me in Star Group, and this is 30 years ago, men are tough. We are going to build you unbreakable. You will not be affected by emotions. You will be able to stay calm and controlled and rational. You will be able to do everything without feeling any emotions. And this is just not right. We realize it now. So when my emotions went high and my rational thinking went low, this is fight and flight mode. This is absolute panic mode. And this affects everybody in exactly the same way. It's not about saying we don't have emotions and we can cut them out. It's about allowing ourselves the vulnerability to say, I know my emotions are going to take over. When something goes wrong and I'm uncertain about what's happening and I'm going into panic mode, How do I control my emotions and bring my emotions back down and my rational thinking back up? And intuitively, this is something that I did prior to the shooting. I sat down with my wife 5 years prior to the shooting, and I said to her, I'm going into Star Group. Now, there's a very real possibility I may be shot and injured. I may be shot and killed. And the conversation I had with her was not about what's going to happen to me, because our actions, our behaviors have impacts on other people, our teams, our organization, our family, our loved ones. So my conversation was, if I get shot and I die, what is your life going to look like? And we had conversations about not me saying, I want you to do this, I think you should do life this way. It was about whatever you choose to do, I fully support. Now, that comes down to the concept of if I had died, she may have gone through the psychological trauma of, oh my gosh, Derrick's dead, we've got children. Would he want me to stay single and look after the children and then have a life afterwards? Would he want me to have a husband and have an easy life and have him to help look after the children? And so we had a discussion about it. Whatever she wanted to do, I fully support. I trusted her to do the right thing. So we had a discussion around, and we literally had this discussion this way. We had a discussion that she could go on and get married and have somebody look after the children. She could go on and be single and look after the children herself, and then have a life with somebody else after that if she chose. And the third option that I did throw to her was that she could just build a little shrine in the corner and worship me every day. And obviously that wasn't the popular option. But what it did was it broke the tension of that VUCA situation. For her, this was literally emotionally getting volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. And so that little bit of humor injected into it just broke that tension. And she was going, oh my gosh, Derrick, oh my gosh, Derrick. Oh, Derrick, just shut up. Now talk to me seriously. But she was able to have that conversation because we broke that tension. And there are many, many ways that we can break tension. Humor is one of my favorite ways. But having some idea of what we're going to deal with and some idea of how it's going to affect us and how we will manage that is another way to break the tension. My emotions went high when I got shot. My rational thinking went low. But as I was falling, I've said, oh my gosh, I'm being shot. Don't be too hard on yourself. Bang, that came down. My rational thinking came up, and it went to my plan of action. Now, I had the conversation with my wife and said, if I get shot, this is what I expect for you. These are your options. But I also went away for myself and I said, if I do get shot, as a result of other things that I've been involved in my life, other gun incidents, other major traumas, other major injuries, what can I expect of myself? What's going to happen in my mind and what's going to happen in my body? And I knew that absolute perfect response was going to be down here. But I also knew that if it was absolute chaos, it was going to be down here. And my emotions were going to be all over the place. And what I said, if it happens to end up in chaos, how do I control my mind so that I can control my body, so that I can take that response further along that continuum towards perfect? And that preparation allowed me to do what I did on the ground, understanding what I needed to do physically, mentally, and emotionally. And there were four things specifically that I needed to do. The first was to control panic. Don't let panic take control of the situation. Because generally, when our emotions go high and our rational thinking goes low, we are in panic mode, fight and flight, absolute fear. And I didn't want that to take over and control the situation. When we go into fight and flight mode, our body has a physiological response. And I needed to control that response to physical as well as psychological trauma. Our body reroutes blood away from our brain. We've still got enough to just survive, but it goes into the other organs for fight and flight. I needed to reroute that blood back to my brain so that I could use my higher level thinking. I could use my creativity. I could use my problem solving. So controlling the shock response was very important. I knew I needed to slow down my heart rate, and I knew I needed to slow down my breathing, because if I could control those four things, it would slow down my rate of bleeding. And then there was a whole heap of physiological things that I needed to be able to do for the 3 hours that I was lying on the ground. But that discussion with my wife and that preparation emotionally for myself was one of the key factors to me being able to have the mindset to be able to manage that situation for 3 hours.
Right. So, to shift a little bit, because
Yep,
our, at the risk of offending any listeners, uh, our society these days is really focused on PTS and PTSD, in
correct.
terms of, or PTSS, post-traumatic stress syndrome, disorder, whatever you want to call it.
Yep,
And people get so attached to their traumas. And this doesn't sound compassionate. I have my own trauma, and so I'm kind of speaking about myself as well, is we can often create our identity around our trauma. And like, I've had trauma. I've had this big thing happen and everything. How would you suggest people who haven't done that preparation ahead of time and now are maybe stuck in this PTS, whatever they call it, with post-traumatic stress, anxiety, all those things? How can any of us get past that and lean into human durability after the fact?
yep, absolutely. So I love your definitions of PTSS, PTS, PTSD, because everybody has their own terminology. It is just post-traumatic stress, okay, and that's all it is. Um, it's a condition that some people do have, um, but I believe that the majority of people should be able to get through it to find post-traumatic growth. It is a matter of accepting that this is something that we do have now. This is whether it's PTS, whether it's a physical injury, whether it's a mental health condition outside of PTS. Um, we have this condition, we have certain responses, we have certain ways of behaving, we have certain worries, and saying, I know that these things are going to happen. When they happen, I know that my response is going to be X, Y, Z, whatever it might be. And as a result of that response, it's going to have an impact on my behaviors, my emotional feeling, the impact on my family. So it's about anticipating. I know this is possibly going to happen. Understand what are the triggers, what are the signs and symptoms that say you're starting to head that way, recognize them, and as soon as you see them coming up, already have a plan of action to say, I see that sign, how am I going to respond? When I see that sign, what do I do? This was one of the most important things that I did in my psychological response to the shooting. 5 days after the shooting, wanted to see a psych. He picked my brain, I picked his brain. Prior to me speaking to him, I had flashbacks, I had nightmares, I had bad dreams, and I was able to talk to him about I've had these things, but I didn't have any guilt associated with them. And when I experienced them, I just said to myself, wow, that was an interesting experience. I wonder what was happening there. I wonder where that's come from. And it was exploring it with curiosity and going, this is so normal. Lots of people go through these psychological traumas. I am not infallible, but I am also not weak. I am not pathetic. I am not someone who should feel shame for going through these experiences. They are absolutely normal. So while I was in hospital, an example for you, while I was in hospital, just about probably 3 days after the shooting, still in intensive care. I've got damage to both of my forearms and my wrists and completely bandaged up. My 2 bullets in my stomach, bullets in my left thigh, my right Achilles tendon, took a bullet through that as well. And so I'm lying in hospital and I cannot do a thing, cannot move, cannot pick up a knife or a fork. And it's about 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm sound asleep. And all of a sudden there was this absolute massive metallic commotion outside my room. It was horrendous. And as I analyze it now, I think, the drip stands that hold the bottles when they're just these metal poles. I think somebody dropped 3 million of them just outside my door. But what I experienced was I was woken out of my sleep to this calamity outside my door, and instantly I've peaked to somebody is coming to kill me. They're coming into the hospital, they're killing everybody on their way through. This is what the calamity is about. I'm about to die. Somebody's coming in to murder me. And my emotion has gone absolutely massive. My rational thinking's down here. I didn't even think that it could be something else. I just knew somebody was coming to shoot me. After a few minutes of me waiting for this and waiting for somebody to come into the room, and I was in absolute fear for my life, I started thinking, there's no more commotion outside the door. There's no one running and screaming and yelling. There's no shooting. There's no other things happening. And then I started processing, what else could it have been? What else might have been happening? And then I started analyzing. It was all just a metallic sound. There was nobody screaming. There was nobody went, oh my gosh, that was a bad mistake. It was just this metallic sound. It must have just been an accident. And very, very slowly, it didn't happen instantly. Very, very slowly, my emotions came down, my rational thinking came back up, and I was able to go back to sleep. But I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel shame. I didn't feel like I was weak because I had that fear. It's normal. We all have these things. But that was my preparation 5 years beforehand. I knew that nightmares, flashbacks, panic attacks are all something that could be experienced by somebody going through being shot. I didn't know exactly what they were, but I was able to just lean into it and be vulnerable enough to go, I'm having one of those experiences. I now know what I can do in my mind, and I was able to bring the emotion back down and the rational thinking back up. These are the things that I spoke to the psychiatrist about just 3 months after the shooting. And I said, this happened, but then after a little while, I was able to balance myself again and just relax. And eventually I was actually able to laugh at it. Oh, do you know what happened to me last night? I heard this calamity outside the room and everybody's going, oh my God, how bad was that for you? And I said, well, it was bad, but it didn't stay bad. It was okay now. Oh, and actually interesting. And this is the first time it's actually hit me. People coming into my room, my family, my friends, they held on to the trauma of me going through that longer than I held on to the trauma. That's a really interesting thing that I've only just realized as we're talking about this now, Kelly. And it is that concept of, oh my gosh, this must have been bad for you. I need to feel sorry for you. And they were holding on to the trauma. But I just knew that it's something I went through. Now, 10-year-old kids going through school, they get into bad relationships, they get excluded by their friends, they feel this is all just normal stuff. And sometimes they come home to their parents and talk to their parents about, oh my gosh, my friends weren't nice to me. And sometimes parents go, oh, this is so cute. You won't even remember this 10 years' time. But that being excluded by their friends is the most important thing to that child at the time. That child is going through massive trauma, and we've got to treat that trauma with the reality that that child is experiencing, right? And we've got to bring their emotions back down, help them understand what was going on, and help them understand their own capacity to be able to deal with it. And anybody going through trauma, the more we're able to lean into it and say, do you know something? This is not a strange thing. Other people experience these things. Let me find out what other people do, how they manage it. And maybe I'll be able to use some of their systems as well. But understanding what those signs and symptoms are, that it's heading that way, that is one of the major things we can do. Rather than going, I can see this going bad. I hope it doesn't escalate to the worst point and still trying to push ourselves through it. Say, no, I can see it going that way. I know I need to do X, Y, Z now to avoid that. And then once we're able to get to that point of, oh, I can see that and I know that I can handle that part, then lean into it just that little bit further and go, okay, I've got to the point now where I can't handle it, and back away again. It's basic CBT. What do they call CBT?
Cognitive behavioral therapy.
Thank you very much. Mental
You're
blank
welcome.
here. Yeah, absolutely. It is the basic cognitive behavioral therapy of exposure therapy. Just give yourself a little bit, recognize it, and then step back. Go back into your comfort zone. Comfort zone. I love having conversations about comfort zone. But go back into your comfort zone. Recover your mental stability, and then allow yourself to come back out of it as well. I'm just going to delve into a little bit of comfort zone conversation here. Generally speaking, we are told, get out of your comfort zone, get out of your comfort zone, because that's where growth is. That's where you extend yourself. That's where you start learning new things and you're pushing yourself just that little bit further. And that is true. We do need to get out of that comfort zone to grow. But every now and then, we need to climb back into that comfort zone and go, oh, I'm comfortable, I'm safe, I'm sound, I can be really happy in this zone, because that's when we are in a no stress place and we start to regain our confidence. That's when we can start, our emotions are coming down, our rational thinking is coming up, and we can start analyzing what we were doing, how we were doing it, how we might want to do it differently next time. And we can do that in our comfort zone. And then once we regain our confidence and our courage and our understanding of our capacity and embrace the systems that work for us, that's when we can then start stretching ourselves out of the comfort zone again. Because we have our mental stress in a good place and a mental health where we can look forward to taking on a little bit more of a challenge. But every now and then we've got to just go, nope, I want to climb back into my comfort zone and not feel guilty because you want to do that. It's what we need to do at that time. Throughout my 2.5 years of rehabilitation, I had highs, I had lows, I have fears, I had doubts, I had failures, I had successes, I had great times, I had bad times. And some of those times I had the dark thoughts of, is this all worth it? And you know, I will put it out there. I had suicide on the table. I considered, is suicide a good option for me? Now, again, I don't feel guilty about considering that, because I am a person who I like to think I consider every option possible available to me. Suicide, taking my own life, was one of those options. And I've gone, other people do that. Is this something that I want to do? It was on the table and I've gone, do you know something? I don't like that option. So I took it off the table again. But I'm not shy about talking about the fact that I did consider it. But again, that's what people do. We all do those things. We just don't like to talk about it. And I took that off the table and I started considering other options. And I found something to give me meaning. And I've got 5 drivers for success that I will talk about towards the end of our discussion, because I like to leave people with these 5 drivers. But number 3 driver is having meaning in our life. And my meaning in my life was I wanted to be here for my children. I wanted to be able to sit there with them. And something that I discussed with my wife 5 years prior to the shooting, I said, if I do get shot, I need you to know anything better than death is a bonus. Death is a reality. Anything better than death is a bonus. And we absolutely discussed the fact that if I get shot and I become a quadriplegic, paraplegic, and I spend the rest of my life in a wheelchair, I want you to know that I will find a way to be happy so long as I'm able to interact with my kids. That was the bottom line for me. And that was what gave me meaning in my life. Just to be there and be the happy Derrick for my children, and find a way to enjoy it. By giving myself that emotional preparation beforehand, as a result of what I might go through, I may end up in a wheelchair and I may spend the rest of my life in a wheelchair. I don't care. I know what the risk is that I'm going into. And if I wasn't prepared to spend the rest of my life in a wheelchair as a result of what happened to me, then at this point, I need to make a better decision. I won't go into Star Group. I will find another job that I will still enjoy. And I could have become a bus driver. I could have become an accountant. I could have become anything I wanted, because I wasn't prepared to take this risk. But the risk is about risk tolerance, right? I took it, and I do a lot of risky things in my life, but I make a really clear distinction that I don't see myself as a risk taker. I see myself as a risk manager. And when I was making this decision as to whether I want to take this risk to go into Star Group, I took a look at the risks, my risk tolerance, the safety profile of Star Group, the equipment, the training, all those sorts of things. And I balanced it based on my skills and my approach. Do I have a better than average chance of avoiding something like being shot, and certainly avoiding getting major injuries as a result of the other things? And the chances were there. It was a 17-year history of Star Group where nothing like that had happened. And that's because they are so well trained, so well prepared, got so much equipment. And I knew that it was still a possibility there, but I was doing things to avoid it as well. But I also had to accept that that was still a risk. As much as we do everything to avoid it, it was still a risk, and I had to be prepared. And so it's about risk tolerance, but it's about saying I'm a risk manager, not a risk taker. We will all take risks in our life, but we need to be well prepared for them physically, mentally, and particularly emotionally.
Right. Um, so what I'm getting from a lot of what you're talking about, that human durability, or to increase our own durability as humans, preparation, education, information are all really key, as you think of all the potential um, consequences, pieces that come with risk, that come with any decision we make. If you could leave our listeners with one tip or one thing you want them to remember, what would that be?
So this is where I would default to those 5 drivers for success. And I believe that throughout my life and even now and moving forward, these 5 drivers have a massive influence in my life. And the first one is to retain a sense of optimism about the future. No matter where we are now, we need to know that there is somewhere better than where we are, somewhere better that we know that we will be able to get to if we do the work, if we do what is required to be able to get there. So that's retaining that sense of optimism about the future. For me, when I was lying on the ground, it wasn't about getting back to Star Group and being fully operational. It wasn't about getting the promotion. It wasn't about buying a new car or having a better house. It was about just getting back to my family and be able to interact with them. That was the sense of optimism. I want to get back there because that's going to be better than where I am now. The second one is influence, believing in our ability to influence what we are going through. Now, as you say, people with PTS, being able to influence it, have some influence on how it's going to affect us and how we are going to take control of it, not let it control us. That is an iterative process. It is small step after small step after small step. And we've got to celebrate each of those small steps. I got through that one and believe that we can influence the next one as well. But this doesn't apply to just PTS. This is 10-year-old kids in schools. What can you do to influence those relationships or understand that's their problem, not ours? All the way through to real estate, finance, and fighter pilots. What can you do to influence your situation and your progress? The third one is meaning. Whatever we do in life, it has to have a deep meaning to us. Now, a lot of people are in jobs that don't have meaning to them. They're just doing the job because they have to do it and they can't do anything else. What the meaning for that is that you are doing something to provide yourself with the finances to be able to get through the rest of life as well. Now, knowing that this is not the job that you enjoy is fine because you're able to get here and you're able to influence your life to start growing outside of that job iteratively, small step by small step. But you've got to understand the meaning that it has for you or the meaning it has on the impact of the rest of your life. The meaning for me in my life was just to have a great influence on my children. But the meaning of going into Star Group, and this is a conversation I had with my wife as well 5 years prior to the shooting, if I die, what will you tell my children about the reasons why I went into a job where I knew that I could die? And the meaning was that somebody needs to step up and look after society and be prepared to take those risks. For me, that meant a lot to me. And I wanted to be that person that did that, but also be the symbol that other people should be doing these things for society and looking after each other as well. So the third one, meaning, is very, very important. The fourth one is plan. And plan for me is just some idea of what you're going to deal with, some idea of how it's going to affect you, and some idea of how you're going to be able to manage it. But that comes out of having some open, honest, confronting conversations with yourself prior to the actual making a choice to take that action, understanding what the impact is going to be. But it just needs to be that basic, some idea of what you're going to deal with, how it's going to affect you, and then how you might have influence over it. And the fifth one is probably the most important, and it's support. It's about throwing your hand in there and saying, do you know something? This may be bigger than anything that I know what I'm going to do. I may not be the perfect person to handle this. This is bigger. This is VUCA. This is volatile. I don't understand it. Uncertain. It's complex. It's ambiguous. I don't know exactly what I'm doing. Can someone give me support? 5 days after the shooting, I threw my hand in there and said, get me a psych. I just wanted to pick their brain, but I also had to rely on the support of other people. But when we get support, it's not about defaulting and saying, excellent, somebody else is going to do this for me. I can now sit back and relax. No, it's about still being the driver behind it, but taking that other support and using that support to, again, point two, influence what you do for the future. So optimism, influence, meaning, planning, and support.
Wow. Now, one thing you didn't mention in sharing your story was that not only did you recover fully, mentally, physically, emotionally, all of the pieces, but you actually went back to work with the Star Group.
Yeah, yeah. 2.5 years after the shooting, went back to fully operational. Doctors were predicting that I'd never walk properly again. I still have only 20% of my Achilles tendon thickness holding together. And so they said, if I run or hop or skip or jump or put any strain on it, that is going to snap. But I still only have 20% of my Achilles, and I went back to fully operational. I got support from doctors, physios, all sorts of people, built the strength and proprioceptors and all sorts of things in there, but also accepted that as much as I was pushing myself and looking towards getting fully strong and able to do that, I also accepted that at some stage my Achilles may just snap. So it wasn't about being invulnerable. It was about being completely vulnerable, that I'm going well. It may still happen, but I went back and I've spent the last 30 years after the shooting in Star Group, fully operational. I went back to normal policing and got a promotion as a sergeant. I've played basketball. I've done all strange sorts of risky things. In fact, at the end of 2022, I also rode my mountain bike over the top of the Himalayas in Nepal, 5,416 meters at minus 15 degrees. So despite all those injuries, despite the physical potential trauma, the emotional potential trauma, I did go back to fully operational and doing everything that I loved doing, always aware that the psychological trauma may get to me at any stage. And if it does, I need to be able to see those signs and those indicators and say, okay, what do I need to do? And there are times where I get emotionally overwhelmed by certain things, but I'm able to go, okay, I see that sign. I need to climb back into my comfort zone, rebuild what I need to rebuild, and then take myself back out of it again. But yeah, thank you. I went back to fully operational, and I enjoy a full life these days.
That's fantastic. Now, if somebody wants to know, if any listeners want to know more about human durability or your speaking engagements or anything like that, how can they find you?
I'm on all the social medias. The Facebook, LinkedIn is one of the great ones to get in contact with me. I certainly have a website, so long as you know how to spell my name correctly, and I'm sure that'll be in the show notes. And I these days I get to open and close conferences and run half-day to 2-day workshops all around the world. I've been to the USA 4 times, and I'm coming back to the USA early 2025. I've had a 4,000 person audience in Singapore, and one company forced me to go to Fiji for a week and spend a week there. It was stressful. So I have that beauty of being able to travel around the world. So if any of your listeners would like me to come and deliver a session at their work, or do it virtually, I'd be very happy to do that, and contact me through socials or the website.
Fantastic. Now, you haven't mentioned if you've written a book or if anything's been written about you, but if a book was to be written or a movie made about your story, as you shared it with us, what would it be called? And who would you want to play you in the movie?
Ah, well, I am 80% through writing a book. It's I've done the first draft, and just a little delve into that. People said to me straight away, "You got to write a book. You got to write a book." But I didn't want to write a book about Derek the hero. I now am writing a book which relates to human durability as a story, but it's about the messages of strength for other people. And yes, it talks about Derek's story, but the focus is on other people. So I'm comfortable to write that book now. But what it would be called, I still haven't worked that out. Down in the Dust, the phoenix emerging from the fire. That is the theme of the book, but I don't know what the title will be. But if there was a movie, I love Matt Damon. He is absolutely a brilliant, tough, serious character that just encapsulates that special forces, that tough guy. But I want Matt Damon mixed with Ryan Reynolds, right? Because Ryan Reynolds encapsulates my approach to comedy and situation. I just love Ryan Reynolds' sense of humor. So if I get a cross between the two, yeah, that'd be
Right.
great.
Well, being that he's a hometown boy, my vote is always for Ryan Reynolds because he's from my hometown. But thank you so much, Derek, for being here, for sharing your story and your wisdom and this amazing mind shift that I think more people need to know about, from uh, resilience to what's bigger, which is human durability. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us.
And Kelly, thank you. You have opened my mind to other possibilities and other ways to discuss human durability. And this is something that I get from everybody that I talk to. Um, but what I've got out of this conversation today has been brilliant. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.